Welcome to this little resource on designing PowerPoint slides. We'll cover the important issues to think about when designing your slides by showing you a slide that has a particular problem, followed by a better version. Before you move to the better version, think about how you would address the problem. Sometimes we just want to jazz up our slides so they're not boring. But think about the text. Even though this text is a good size, it's very difficult to read. What would you do to improve it? This is better. We need to think about how the text will sit with the design. Will the text be easy to read, or will the background take over? In this slide, although the design element is still there, the text is much easier to read. Color blindness is more common than most people realize. Color combinations that many people find difficult or impossible to distinguish include red-green, blue-yellow, and blue-green. Even if you're not colorblind, you'll probably find the text on this slide difficult to read. Of course, this doesn't mean you can't have a background color. Just make sure you don't use the combinations mentioned in the previous slide, and make sure there's enough contrast for the text to stand out. Dark text on light background is generally best. Where do your eyes focus on this slide? There's so much going on, it's difficult to know what's important. And although you can read the first line on the right on your computer screen, in a presentation it would be far too small to read. Generally, your text needs to be at least size 20 and preferably larger. And although it might be tempting to be creative with your fonts and animations, remember that your audience needs to be focused on you, and they won't be if they need to spend time working out what's on the PowerPoint slide. Notice the differences between this slide and the previous slide. We need to use large text size, but not too large. You need to allow for some white space on the page. This slide uses size 28. Simple fonts such as Arial, Calibri, Cambria, or Times New Roman are easier to read, and don't use all capitals. Be consistent with fonts and size. It's particularly important to show consistency within headings and within subheadings. Make them all the same color, font, size, bold or not bold, italics or no italics, etc. And underlining is distracting and should only be used for hyperlinks. Of course, you can still highlight the importance of some words in the general text. You can use bold or italics or even another color. Use dot points where possible and always align them to the left margin. Text is difficult to read if it's lined on the right side or centered, although of course headings can be centered. Dot points should preferably be kept to no more than 6 per slide. Your slides shouldn't tell the full story. They're just prompts for your discussion. For this reason, block text, for example, a whole paragraph or even a long sentence, should never be used. Effective slides have a good balance between text and white space. The text here is spread over a large section of the slide and is fairly balanced. And of course, be careful with animations. Too much is distracting. Although this slide might look a bit boring, it's easy to understand. A graphic might make it more interesting, but as we'll discuss next, they should always relate to and add to the text, and I couldn't find one that would add any value here. You might find some pretty pictures to use, but you have to ask, how many should you use and how are they related to the text? Your message is in the text, and this is what should stand out. Any graphics you use should be directly related to your text and should add value to the presentation. In this slide, the picture reinforces the idea of constraint. Even then, remember that unless graphics are statistical representations, your text needs to be the focal point. Graphics, tables, and charts can be useful ways to summarize data, but not like this. This is just a collection of numbers, making it difficult for the audience to focus on the main points. Although the presenter would probably make it obvious what the tables relate to, it's useful to mention it on the slide in case the audience doesn't hear this information. This is particularly important here given that there are 3 tables presented. This is the same data as in the final table in the previous slide, but it's much clearer. There's a clear heading and legend, and we know what the colours represent, and although the percentage numbers are identified, the audience can quickly see the big picture in relation to pass failure rates in each category through the use of colour. One thing to remember here is to make sure you identify each axis so we know what the data refers to. Here's a summary of the key points. We hope you found this information useful, and best wishes for effective presenting.